Hey, good evening. Welcome into the David Paisano Show. I realize I haven't been on for a while. People have probably forgotten about me, but that's okay. I'm a relatively forgettable figure as I am. But anyway, folks, I thought I'd go live. We've been out trying to get our wheat harvested and get our crops in, and we got most everything planted. Didn't get any double crop Milo planted or beans planted, but it's been raining constantly and it's been a struggle to get these crops harvested. And I don't know, we still got a couple, well, 500-600 acres of wheat yet to cut. Who knows what we're going to plant? But anyway, still busy on the farm. Hope you enjoyed the picture I put up at the beginning of the show. It's one of my favorites. My nephews gave me that Forrest Fenn treasure box, if you will. It's filled with some bells and confetti and all kinds of fun stuff. And I guess I did actually get the treasure chest from the thrill of the chase, and I surrounded it with that Frank Dobie book, a couple of Forrest Fenn's books. Also added to it some of the funky. People used to send me stuff that I'd order on eBay in these funky envelopes with all of these old stamps on them. It was the weirdest thing. But as you can see, I included a couple examples of those. And I happened to be at the post office today, and you wouldn't believe they have reissued the American Bison postage stamp. I couldn't resist. So I bought the American Bison. But is this really bison? This is more like a buffalo. It's not bison antiquus. Well, I couldn't resist buying a sheet of those. If you're on my real close friend list and I happen to send you a letter, I'll probably put one of these bison stamps on there just for fun. But I thought it would be fun to get together tonight to discuss Forrest Fenn, the literate man. Now, I was pretty hard on Forrest Fenn in my last show, pointing out that the FBI had been pretty tough on him, and he had all these things rattling around in his brain about the FBI and all of this back in 2009, 2010. And, he was kind of maybe a little edgy, but I want to pivot from that and go to talking about Forrest Fenn, the literate man. And I think this is a great conversation. It may go on for at least an hour, maybe even more. I don't know. And a lot of this is I'm going to do off the top of my brain. And so if I get a little befuddled along the way, please, try my patience and let me just kind of go full course. And I'll try to respond to people who have things to say in the chat as well. But first of all, I want to get this out of the way. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. That's right. I threw a net in the river and caught some fish. And it's been more than 2 weeks since my last confessional. Okay, so now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's get on with talking about Forrest Fenn, the literate man. So, when do we believe Forrest Fenn's interest in literature started, or his interest in languages and all of this kind of thing? Um, well, I mean, we know that back in school, he says that he, kind of had some problems with, the Spanish teacher, and he didn't really like to listen to the Spanish lecture. So the language thing is, I don't know, maybe questionable, or maybe he was just kind of making a little bit of that up for the book. But let's go forward to when he actually did go to college, and he did truly go to college because he is a founding member of the Westerners at Texas Tech University in Lubbock. And here we can see Forrest Fenn maybe molding his mind around the idea of how important literature and literary works are. And so I think the first taste of Forrest Fenn and his interest in literature may arise from the Westerners in that organization, because a good part of the Westerners is understanding some of the information about old stories about the Southwest and the tales of Texas and some of these types of things. And I then read an article about Forrest Fenn and his interest in um, Frank Dobie. And this came about from a Texas Monthly magazine article that was written about his gallery. But also at the end of it, he was mentioned as having had an interest in and having several books of its or of that person. Again, Evetts Haley plays an important part of Forrest Fenn's interest in literature because he was one of the other people that were involved in the founding of the Westerners at Texas Tech University. And so, as we look at Forrest Fenn's development, his interest in literature and those types of things, you can see that it's growing and it's developing along the way. Throughout the thrill of the chase, he introduced us to a number of different items and things that had to do with literature. So, first of all, he showed us his Four Edge books and his Four Edge book collection. If you ever looked at the background of Forrest Finn's study, you would notice that he had a very large collection of various and sundry books on those walls, in those bookcases. And so it's undoubtable the amount of interest he had in this genre of literature, old stories. He tells us the tale of how he got a hold of this journal. And he went out and read this journal about this soldier that had witnessed certain things, and he took a friend out to try to find that place. We've heard about his interest and his referencing the Journal of a Trapper, if you will, and the expedition of Lewis and Clark. In the book The Thrill of the Chase, he mentions that important literature and he shares with us his thoughts on Ernest Hemingway. He shares with us his thoughts on authors like F. Scott Fitzgerald, and he shares with us his thoughts on the other um, authors like the one that wrote the book for Holden Caulfield, Catcher in the Rye, if you will. And so he gives us a indication that uh, his interest, he has a vast and wide appreciation or interest in literature. Now, in addition to this, as an author, you can see that he had these relationships with McGarrity. He had these relationships with Douglas Preston. And he had these other relationships with people in the writing community, if you will. Now, whether or not Forrest Fenn was an accepted member or highly participated in any of these writing groups in Santa Fe, New Mexico, is really unknown, and I don't think anybody's chartered the waters here in terms of what and how involved Forrest Fenn was in the literary community within Santa Fe, New Mexico. But insofar as he wrote books and insofar as he had interest in other authors, you have to say that this is a man with a literary interest. So let's pivot to the idea of what is it that we know of Forrest Fenn's writings? What is it that Forrest Fenn was involved in writing? Now, if we go back to Marvin Fenn, we know that Marvin Fenn wrote this document that was about the YMCA, and it was his doctoral thesis. And if you want to go online, you can read his father's doctoral thesis on some mathematical studies about exercise at the YMCA. But that's Marvin Fenn. Okay, we're really talking about Forrest Fenn and trying to draw down into him. Now, so he opens this. So he may have this collegiate interest in literature, and he is a member of the Westerners. And who knows if he was involved in any of the uh, publications that came about from uh, his involvement in college. Don't know. Uh, There are gaps in Forrest Fenn's life that I think uh, would be great to know about if you were doing a complete character study on the man. But let's just pick it up with a few things. So, in his gallery days, he obviously had to research and put together some information about the artist that he was representing at the gallery. And so he had to know about E. Irving Coos. He had to know about Henry Joseph Henry Sharp, or is that Henry Joseph? Sorry, I always get that mixed up. Gaspard, Rapin, all of the artists that Remington, all of these Sloan, all these artists that he represented, he had to have done great literary research into them so he could understand the full breadth and content of their work and to be the expert that he became in the Southwestern art genre. And so, from a literary perspective, he was obviously a reader, taker of notes of what was important and the highlights of those people in order to adequately represent their art and to get the highest dollar value for each of their pieces. Uh, and vis-a-vis, he became then the person that people would call for an appraisal on a piece of art if it was going to be purchased by, let's say, the Gilcrease or whoever. Or if they needed an appraisal, they eventually would call Forrest Fenn because he became the expert on this. And so, from a literary perspective, he had to know a lot about each of these people. So, I would imagine that he probably wrote, for the most part, the information about these individuals and their artwork in the pamphlet documents that then got distributed at each of the showings of the artwork. In other words, there was a dossier about the artist, about the artwork, the history of that artist when he did a, a huge exposition of the artist's work at his gallery. And you can find online many of these publications that were put together for that very purpose of promoting an artist and promoting their artwork at a gallery show. And I would imagine he was involved, greatly in the creation of many of those uh, articles and those pieces. But then let's say that, okay, outside of that, he then wants to become a full-fledged person who writes articles, who gets involved in the archaeological community. And you can go back to some of his writings where he wrote into the academic journals of archaeology. One of the famous ones is his response called the Mother of Indiana Jones. And in the Mother of Indiana Jones, he takes on, some of the preconceptions of the community of archaeologists about the people that are looking for pot hunters, if you will, that aren't in academia. And so he has this relationship with academia, with the literary journals in the art community, as a writer to a number of these publications in the world of art and also in the world of archaeology. Again, his breadth of experience, crossed several different genres here, and so he would communicate with and become a participant in discussions via written communications. There's a citation of Forrest Fenn in Frank Dobie's library where Forrest Fenn reached out and communicated with Frank Dobie. And so you know that he was a letter writer, a communicator with various and sundry people within the, the art world, the literature world, and in the Southwest archaeological world. And so he has these. If somebody would collect Forrest Fenn's papers, I think it would. Oh, it'd be like. Oh, I mean, this would be like the mother lode of information. This would be like Forrest Fenn getting his hands on Coos's documents, where it showed that, where he showed that Sloan, or not Sloan, but yeah, where not Eric Sloan, but where Sharp sold a particular painting to such and such for such amount of money. I mean, it would be fascinating to get a hold of these letters that Forrest wrote to people over time, and see what the contents of these letters were. I mean, seriously, the letters of Forrest Fenn would be a great study in itself if someone could get a hold of this archive. I mean, it'd be like Forrest Fenn acquiring Coos's archive, or Sharp's archive, or maybe Gaspard's papers, or whatever. There's definitely a treasure trove out there of that type of correspondence that Forrest Fenn had with people in those different communities. And the sophisticated thing about Forrest Fenn that's really difficult is that he had this myriad of interests in archaeology, in he had this interest in military aircraft. He has letters he wrote, and there's correspondence with the Super Saber Society, which he's obviously a member of. And so you can't just say, oh, Forrest Fenn communicated with the archaeology community. Oh, Forrest Fenn was a member of the literary archives of Southwestern art. Oh, Forrest Fenn was uh, has a a footprint in um, you know artwork. He has his footprints in so many different places that it runs the gamut. And then don't even get me started on his correspondence that might exist with the Gilcrease Museum, the correspondence with the Cody Museum in Wyoming, the correspondence that Forrest Fenn had with the Panhandle Plains Museum about Indians fishing, painting that might be in there, the correspondence he might have had with Glenna Goodacre, the correspondence he might have had with Eric Sloan, the correspondence he might have had with all of these different people. But my point is the correspondence that Forrest Fenn may have had with all of these different communities would be such a treasure trove as far as literature is concerned. The notes he left for all of the different people that stayed in the casita that was on his property. I'm I'm sure that Forrest Fenn went to the school that many people should go to, and that's the How to Win Friends and Influence People, and the Dale Carnegie School, where a thank you note is important. And I'm sure he wrote thank you notes to all of these people that came to his gallery and visited over time. Michael Douglas, you know, just name all the people that you can think of at this point in time. But I bet you there's correspondence there. Okay, so I kind of talked about and linked the correspondence. Now, for those searchers out there, we all know that our correspondence with Forrest Fenn was like limited. Maybe you got a one sentence reply to Forrest Fenn, if you even got a response. And so when it came to the email world, and it came to the world of talking about his treasure hunt, the correspondence is limited. Very, very limited. Okay, so we've talked about the papers of Forrest Fenn. Now let's get into the gist of publishing, what he published. And again, I already talked about the journal articles that were in archaeology magazines, the the pieces that appeared in other publications, and then you have the publications about Forrest Fenn, prior to his treasure hunt. And here we can look at National Geographic. We can look at Newsweek magazine. We can look at Texas Monthly. We can look at all of the articles that were written about Marvin Fenn and his slideshows that he did throughout Texas about his experience up in Montana. And now it gets a little fuzzy for me when he actually wrote the Bozeman articles. So we now go into this series of things, these articles that Forrest Fenn wrote, and were published in the Bozeman uh, newspaper, if you will. So we have Forrest Fenn as the publisher, article writer for the Bozeman uh, newspaper, and different stories about his experience there. So that pretty much, I think, covers our publications and news periodicals. So the meat of the bones then gets to what literary works do we have that Forrest Fenn has published through a publishing house or is involved in the publishing of. And let's see if I can do a top five. We got John 613. What's a happening, brother? It's a happening. Jeff's here. The Stick Divine is handing out a wave. Steve Klein has 5 fingers, 1 finger, and these fingers, but not that finger. Well, I appreciate that. And then we have Trust the Living. So almost a great top five tonight. So I I needed some assistance in this area, and here is going to be an example how AI shortchanges individuals. And I asked AI for a list of books spanning art. Okay, so anyway, I asked the question of AI a list of Forrest Fenn books in order of publication. So this is what I asked for. Okay, I asked for this. I asked for this list of books, right? And it and and it's here's what AI thinks Forrest Fenn published: The Beat of the Drum and the Whoop of the Dance in 1983, The Genius of Nikolai Feshin, The Secrets of San Lazaro, and TP Spoke, and $17 a square inch. And then it goes into the treasure hunt memoirs. Now, does anybody see a problem with this list? Does anybody actually see a problem with this list? Well, I see a problem with this list because it doesn't mention the animals of Lee. This list that AI came up with this doesn't even mention the book, The African Animals of Lee, which I believe was published before The Beat of the Drum and the Whoop of the Dance. And it doesn't mention The Turquoise. And The Turquoise was a Joe Pogue replication or reproduction of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences rendition of a book called The Turquoise that was originally published in the early 1900s. And The Turquoise, Forrest Fenn's contribution to The Turquoise is that Rex Aerosmith was involved in this. And Rex Aerosmith said, "Hey, Forrest, do you happen to have any items of turquoise in your collection?" And he did. And so there are some color plates in a book called The Turquoise that were from Forrest Fenn, and Forrest Fenn is given credit for having provided the items that are in the photographic book plate. So there's one instance not cited right there by AI. The next item is The Animals of Lee. And The Animals of Lee was this book that Forrest Fenn put together about the artwork of Lee. And Lee had basically went to, I don't know, Africa or somewhere. Anyway, Kilimanjaro, wherever that is, and had made paintings or sketches or diagrams or probably sketches of all of these different animals. And so there is a whole entire publication missing off of this list. So, and I believe both of those came before The Beat of the Drum and the Whoop of the Dance. So let's pick it up with that, okay? So, according to AI, in 1983, The Beat of the Drum and the Whoop of the Dance is a biographical study of the life and artwork of Joseph Henry Sharp. And it is. It truly is. And if you were involved in the chase and you went through all the research items involved here, you know that Forrest Fenn went to Cincinnati. He did some research in Cincinnati about Sharp's family, about where he grew up, about his mother, about his deafness. And if you go through all of this information, you will find a fairly interesting story about Joseph Henry Sharp and how he became deaf. Now, I'm not so sure his research was 100% complete about where Joseph Henry Sharp actually came from. And in his book, he kind of links his heritage back to New York. But I have sources that link Joseph Henry Sharp's lineage back to Tennessee. And this is one of the biggest quibbles I have with Forrest Fenn. This is one of the biggest unanswered questions I have with Forrest Fenn, because I sent a documented family history of Joseph Henry Sharp, his marriage to, or not his marriage, but his parents' marriage, and the family origins and the family stories written in the Library of Congress about a Sharp family and their origins in Tennessee. And the sad thing is, Forrest Fenn did not want to engage with me in a discussion about the life and history of Joseph Henry Sharp and his um, upbringings and where he might have originated, because he spells out in the front of the book a origin story of Joseph Henry Sharp. And I challenged Forrest Fenn on this point because I had a different origin story related to Caswell Conrad Sharp, who is a well-known and documented person in the South and in Tennessee, who had a very large family, who many people have researched, and who many historians agree upon the lineage of the ancestors of Caswell Conrad Sharp. And Forrest Fenn would not engage me in this conversation. Now, the other reason I'm actually bringing this up is because the area of Orange, Tennessee, in which Sharp's Chapel is located, is the place in which my ancestor, um, Martin, arrived and became a indentured, he's a white man, that became an indentured servant to the Gibbs family. And a number of people in the Gibbs family married people in the Sharp family. And eventually, one of my ancestors, Martin, actually married a Sharp. But anyway, he would not engage me in a conversation about the lineage and the historical perspective of Joseph Henry Sharp. And this is one of my greatest disappointments with Forrest Fenn, because none of this had anything to do with his treasure hunt. It had everything to do with his research he did on Joseph Henry Sharp and Joseph Henry Sharp's origins and that kind of thing. And I wasn't trying to prove him wrong. I just wanted to have a discussion about these people and whether or not it was possible. And the reason I bring this up, because it is well documented in the story in Cincinnati, in Illinois, in Ohio, about a mother who fell off of a boat and whose son lost his hearing because he nearly drowned. And his name was Joseph Henry Sharp. And Sharp was deaf his entire life. So anyway, I'm just pointing. Okay, I went way off of where I wanted to go with this. So anyway, you notice how Forrest Fenn named his book "The Beat of the Drum and the Whoop of the Dance." Well, what kind of similarity does this have to the title of "The Thrill of the Chase"? The Thrill of the Chase. Forrest Fenn, his first inclination was to name the book in a way in which it describes the experience, right? So the beat of the drum and the whoop of the dance became Joseph Henry Sharp's life experience out on the prairies, out in Wyoming, out collecting images and creating images of people who followed their life to the beat of the drum and the whoop of the dance. That was Joseph Henry Sharp. And again, we all know about the cabin and how it got moved there. So then the next book, according to AI, that's in the art history, biography, and archaeology areas, The Genius of Nikolai Fenn, Recollections. And this was a biographical overview and artistic recollection of Russian American painter Nikolai Fenn. Now, you realize the reason the author writes these books about these artists is to pump up interest and give context to the paintings that he's selling in the gallery. Now, obviously, by 2001, Forrest Fenn was largely out of the gallery business. And so you wonder, okay, was it really motivated by wanting to promote the gallery, or did he have all this information about fashion that he wanted to present? Or did he still have a store of fashion paintings hanging on the wall in his house, and he felt it necessary to give more context to those paintings? Now, The Secrets of San Lazaro Pueblo comes out in 2004, and this is about his discoveries at the San Lazaro Pueblo site. And so I've read this book. It's an interesting book. It takes items that they discover, him and his co-writer, uh, and somebody might have to help me in the chat with his co-writer of that book, The Secrets of San Lazaro. Um, it's not Gloria Allred, but it's the other acquaintance that he had his entire life actually helped him greatly with the discoveries at San Lazaro. And then the TP Smoke book would be next. So TP Smoke was a new look into the life and work of Joseph Henry Sharp. It's an updated, reimagined book building on his previous research into Joseph Henry Sharp, renamed TP Smoke. I one weekend read both books. I had surgery on my knee and I was recovering from meniscus surgery, and I read both books at the same time. For the most part, TP Smoke is more or less a reprint of the first book with some additional images and maybe a slightly revised historical perspective of J.H. Sharp. So the next book is $17 a square inch, a personal tribute to Eric Sloane. And this book is a retrospective tribute dedicated to the landscape painter and the author Eric Sloane. And I have this book as well. And I consider it probably one of his better books. It's a more personal reflection on his friend of many years. You know, and again, it's another book that was published before his Thrill of the Chase. Now, also missing from this list is the book that he wrote on classic Native American dolls. Where's this listing? Where's this listing, AI? Are you just going to ignore the fact that he wrote this book on the Native American dolls? Yes, you are. You're going to ignore that, AI. And I bought this book as well. And it's a really good picture description book. In other words, here's the doll, here's the information about it, etc. And for a book that you want as a reference book, it's a great reference book, if you will. Now let's get into the Thrill of the Chase. Of course, publication is 2010, 2009, 2010. Now, so I want to draw upon this question. So, in the beginning, in 1983, Forrest Fenn liked to title his books in a narrative format: the beat of the drum and the whoop of the dance. That's what this book is about. So, the Thrill of the Chase, a memoir. What is he chasing? What is the chase about? What are you chasing? If you look at it, are you chasing the beat of the drum and the whoop of the dance again? Maybe. I don't know. And then, of course, we've got the Too Far to Walk book in 2013. And then we've got the Once Upon a While and the Once Upon a While revised. And you can see that those come out during the chase. Now, if you reimagine the Once Upon a While book, these were actually a collection of 39 mini episodes and personal scrapbooks. Yes, many of which had already been on the old Santa Fe Trading Company or had appeared in the Bozeman Chronicles. Now, it doesn't give the date of this, but one of the stories that occurred in the Thrill of the Chase was actually a story that Forrest Fenn had written for the Super Saver Society called My War for Me. And so, My War for Me, which became a multi page chapter of The Thrill of the Chase, was actually something that was he had written for a different purpose, if you will. Or perhaps he had written it for the purpose of The Thrill of the Chase, yet nobody at the time knew what he was up to. But again, I point out that many of these things were uh, replicated. Now, where did he learn about replication and using the same story in multiple places? He famously learned this from author Eric Sloane, and he also learned this from Frank Dobie, two people who would take the same tale of Texas, in Dobie's case, the same Coronado's children's story, in Dobie's case, and put it in a new book with a new title, and yet it'd be the same information. Eric Sloane did the same thing. He took the same information, cut and pasted it in a different format, and put out a new book. That's how he was able to write so many books. Forrest Fenn learned this technique, and he put together TP Smoke, which was just a rewriting the beat of the drum, and he also put together these two books called Once Upon a While and Two Part of Walk, which were just republishing of articles he'd already written and published in other places. I'm not saying that literary people are lazy, but in the case of Forrest Fenn, he seemed to have caught the bug from Dobie and from Sloane. And so the other thing that it's failed to mention here by AI is the limited edition uh, Educating Artie. Now, I'm going to just tell you what Educating Artie was about. Educating Artie was specific instructions to the solver of Forrest Fenn's treasure hunt as to why you don't want to come forward, because there's skunks out there. There's all kinds of animals out in the woods. And that's why Forrest came home, or somebody came home and got sprayed by a skunk. Educating Our D is actually the name of that book. And so you just have to figure out who D is. Okay? Anyway, in order to understand why that book was written, it was written as a set of instruction as to why his thrill of the chase should not be discussed in public. Why you should not go out into the woods. It was as simple as that. And that was what that book was for. And that's why it's only in 100 copies and uh, never made it to the public market. You could say that some of the stories in the revised edition of um, uh, the revised edition was also another example of Forrest Fenn utilizing the same book but adding one story. So the revised edition of Once Upon a While just has uh, some some additional stick figures and a new story. So again, that was just again, I can republish the same book that I did before. Now, so Forrest Fenn had a life of rewriting books. In other words, he'd write the same book. Now, this does not mean that Forrest Fenn copied Mark Feister's uh, Breckenridge book and took characters from that book and put them in his book. It does not mean that. It does not mean that Forrest Fenn took other people's content and put it in his book in a whole book format. Now, are there stories in the thrill of the chase that are akin to story narratives that are in other literary books? Absolutely. And through the life of the thrill of the chase, many of us would get together on Chase Chat and other places and discuss how, oh, that story is just stolen from, a famous story. Oh, he just copied the idea from this book. And again, there were some discussions about how some of this stuff was historically taken out of the context of somebody else's literary writings. But I one time published on my blog site about this time the idea that the Pocahontas story and the story of Avatar are essentially the same exact story. So if you would look at Pocahontas, the story, and look at Avatar, the story, they're exactly the same story. And in fact, I found an article that was written uh, in a literary journal about the fact that there is really only one story. The world exists with one story. There is just really one story out there. And a story begins with, like an introduction, uh, a certain character set, and some sort of ending. And that the way in which you order these story elements determines how the story unfolds. And insofar as written story language has to subscribe to or conform to a certain format in order for it to be an acceptable premise, an acceptable outcome, an acceptable character line for you to uh, get it, if you will. And so, I guess my point is there's only one story, there's only one song. There's only so many notes, there's only so many words. It comes down to how they're organized and put together. Well, we've got to add a couple more people coming in. Fantastic's number 4. Sweet Pea gets the number 5 spot. Newman's number 6. And Pneumatic is number 7. Thank you so much for allowing me to now officially have done a top 10. Well, man, I've been pretty long-winded, and went on quite a while in this presentation. But I feel that we probably have just. I'm going to go back to the screen. I think that we probably only scratched the surface, if you will, on the depth of Forrest Fenn as a literary person by looking at what he wrote, by looking at his associations with other authors, looking at where he might have gotten his inspiration. But to me, one of the most fascinating parts of Forrest Fenn was his literary interests, his contribution to literary works, his associations with artists. And what got me started on this was the day that he had on the back of one of the scrapbooks these books on the wall. And they had a certain set of books on the back of the wall. And I'm thinking, that's a fairly curated list in that scrapbook of books for him to post a picture of. I wonder what they all mean. I wonder what each of those books meant. And just as he had given us a plethora or a library, if you will, of books in the chapter on important literature, so too in his scrapbooks, he gave us over time a glimpse into the different books. And if you actually looked at what was in that curated set of books behind him, there was information that could have been garnered from it and taken from it and put into your thought process. But then later on, he did a few scrapbooks and he, showed you the four edge books that he had in his collection. I remember this video very well. I'm watching Forrest Fenn go through some of the books, and obviously his health was getting a little short-winded, and sometimes you take extra breaths when describing these books. And he gave us a scrapbook video of him going through some of these books, and I think each one of them had a specific meaning. It was his code, and if you understood it, you were getting information. Now, there's a long-form video out there, and I featured it one time, I think, on my Discord channel. Forrest Fenn had these interviews that were done for public television, and they created a public television show, and they had Forrest Fenn going through the famous book that he had that had all of the tear out information. In other words, pasted in the book was the Declaration of Independence. Okay, I'm just kidding. But in this book were original documents that had to do with things that happened in Santa Fe and Native American history and Quanah Parker and uh, the soldier that did certain things. But these were actual historical documents. So the other side of his literary interest is the historical documents that he collected and pasted. Well, I don't think he pasted them in there, but he had these historical documents put into a book, if you will. And if you look at all these historical documents they put into the book, they're just a treasure trove of things that happened in our history. Um, and It was basically a catalog, if you will, of events, that were important to him, if you will. Um, Newman Sagewalker can name that tune in one note. Yeah, that favorite show of ours where you want to name that tune. Well, I can get the password to you in 2 words. The solution to Forrest Fenn's puzzle comes down to one word. How many words will it take in order for me to get you to say that word? These are games we can't play yet, but maybe soon. At Ben Baree, we'll be playing Password, and we'll be playing with Shiloh. And I can get the solution from Shiloh in 3 questions. Oh, well, I can get the solution from Shiloh in 1 question. uh, oh, hey, Nomadic. Hey, Sweet Pea. Fantastic. Uh, uh, I like the way you're thinking. Yeah, so anyway, I think that's about. I mean, I still have a half a beer left because I was talking a lot, not drinking. But I think there's a lot to be learned about Forrest Fenn as the literary man. And I've kind of done a show on his archaeological interest. That was like my last show that I did. I haven't really done a show on his artistic, and maybe there's a show out there where I'll go through my knowledge of what Forrest Fenn knew about artwork and different artists and how he culminated that into a gallery. What his interest was in sculpting, the sculptors that he knew, the sculptors that he collected, uh, and some of these things. And you got to remember, I don't know everything. I may have missed books and publications that Forrest Fenn was involved with over time. Uh, I'm just citing the sources that I found along my journey. And I welcome anybody in the chat to add publications that they know about, or things that were written about Forrest Fenn, or uh, publications he put out, or communications he made that I don't know about. And I'm sure there's hundreds, I'm sure there's thousands of these. I just scratched the surface with what I was familiar with. I own basically all of Forrest Fenn's. I have the turquoise, and one of my prized possessions is I did get Forrest Fenn to sign the bookplate page in the Joe Pogue book, The Turquoise, where Forrest Fenn has his turquoise items in a plate. I'm probably the only person in the world that has a signature on that page in a Joe Pogue book. But I don't know how many other people even knew that he was in that book, that his items were in there. And I'll tell you exactly how I found that out. You won't believe this story. I walked into the DAV thrift store one day. As I usually do, I went to the book section just to kind of see if there was anything interesting in there. And at the time, I was just getting involved in Forrest Fenn's chase. And stacked up on each other was an archaeological book, let's say, I don't know, a journal of archaeology. And underneath that was this book called The Turquoise by Joe Pogue. And when I opened the book, it turned exactly to the page with Forrest Fenn on it and his color plates. Honest to God, that's a true story. and how in all of the gin joints and all of the places in all of the world, how is it that I get an interest in the Forrest Fenn treasure and I go into a DAV thrift store, I open up a random book and it has Forrest Fenn right in front of me. One of the oddest and weirdest days in my life was that day when that happened. Now, I couldn't help but pick up a copy of one of Suzanne Summers' books that happened to be visually in the same location as those two other books. So it was absolutely weird. Now, I can maybe partially explain how this could happen. Here's how this can happen, okay? So, Rex Aerosmith's wife. Rex Aerosmith is from Belleville, Kansas. Rex Aerosmith's wife is from, let's say, this area. And is there a possibility, an acquaintance of, I think her last name Calhoun or Crawford or, I don't know, can't remember what her last name was. But anyway, there is a slight possibility these were acquaintances of the Aerosmiths. And they had died. And their possessions got left to the DAV thrift store. And hence they landed on the shelves of the DAV thrift store. And that these were things that they had gotten in the 1970s, 1960s from via Rex Aerosmith. And maybe the connection here was this was a book that Rex Aerosmith had given to somebody here in Salina or this local area. And it then filtered to the thrift store. And it had nothing to do with Forrest Fenn, but had more to do with Aerosmith's and his relationship to Belleville in this area. But it was still so odd. It was still so odd that I would happen to have come across Forrest Fenn, and it turned to the page with these book plates. Now, let's say this was related somehow to Aerosmith. Logically, Aerosmith's relationship to Fenn would mean that those pages were probably the most laid out and opened up pages in that book. In other words, Rex Aerosmith's family member said to somebody, "Hey, look at these uh, uh, things in this book. They're from my gallery owner partner, Forrest Fenn." And Joe Pogue and a bunch of us got together with the New Mexico Press and we put out a reprint of this book, turned to page 95 or whatever it was, 99, and look at that image. And so naturally, through the process of the book opening and the people looking at that page, it was going to open to that page no matter who picked it up, because that was the page most referenced. Now I'm just trying to explain this logically away as to why it would turn to that page. And I think this is a reasonable explanation how a book could open to a certain page. But if I go to the library and I open up Blasted Beloved Breckenridge someday and it suddenly shows me a treasure box, I'm going to probably shit my pants. Yeah, I still have that book. I have it autographed by Forrest Fenn. On the page, yeah, I have that book. It's in the box. The box might be in my attic now. I don't know. I moved a bunch of shit. It used to sit right back there, but I got tired of looking at it every time I did a show. Anyway, uh, but anyway, the next week, I went into the DAV thrift store, and they had a Thigh Master. No, just kidding. But I did actually find a couple Suzanne Summers books there at the thrift store one day. Uh, you still have that book? Yeah, I do. I still have everything. I haven't put any of it on eBay yet. Oh, I forgot to mention the High Plains Paleo posters that Forrest Fenn was involved with, and printing and literarily publishing. There's another published item from Forrest Fenn. Now, did the One Horse Land and Title Company publish any books by other authors? Don't know. Don't know. But the fact that he owned his own publishing company also makes him a literate man. Oh, the community has bits and pieces of a bigger picture, a really good story. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the story of Avatar, the Tree of Life, the Tree of Life. Oh, anyway. Uh, but yeah, so I mean, that was probably one of the other. Here's the other weird thing that happened to me. Weird things happen. So New Mexico is the land of enchantment, right? I swear to God, it's the land of practical jokers. Period. So I go out and I get a hotel, and I think I'm in Santa Fe or no. The first night I stayed in one of these small communities at a Super 8, uh, like Pojiquo or anyway, it's along the main drag. Uh, there's a gas station there. I can picture the hotel. I come out the next morning and there's a I kid you not, weirdest things happen in New Mexico. I come out and on my windshield, on my um, windshield washer, some child had placed a toy pickup truck on my windshield wiper. It's just sitting there on my wiper, like if I turned it on and flick it off. And on the ground next to my vehicle was like some oranges, of all things. And I come out to my pickup and I'm looking at it like, what the hell are these people? They put oranges next to your vehicle and they put toy pickup trucks on your wiper, on your front windshield. This is my first night. This is like my first night in New Mexico. And these practical jokers in New Mexico, the land of enchantment, are putting stuff on my vehicle and throwing oranges in the parking lot. I didn't know if this was some pagan ritual. I didn't know if this was the spirits talking to me. I think there might have been a broken dinosaur too. I don't know. It was weird. Well, the sad part about the whole Forrest Fenn treasure hunt is that so many of the really good stories and the good people stories of the thrill of the chase are not even around to enjoy the denouement of the chase. And I'm talking about people like Mindy Fossey, who had a nice little blog and wrote about the chase. And I'm talking about people like uh, the guy that was in like Durango, Colorado, Scott or Sean Dodson. Uh, you know, some of the people that were really the glue. You know, um, Sasha and Jason and Illinois Ghost and um, Cochaluz. A lot of these people whose stories are more interesting than the people that came in like K Crow and Posey and the Hearst. There were so many stories that Netflix did not find that were so much better. Okay, I'll give you credit. Blowing up a boulder, kind of interesting, but Scott Conway taking an excavator out to Elvado Lake, an actual excavator, is a lot more interesting than somebody searching all winter to find dynamite. I mean, all you need is a blasting cap, some ammonia nitrate, some diesel fuel, and I could have got that boulder moved. I mean, you ain't good very you are very good rednecks if you can't source some fertilizer, diesel fuel, and a blasting cap. I mean, I'm just saying. But it takes a nut fry to get an actual excavator out to a lake under the cover of darkness. But I mean, I almost froze to death out in New Mexico one time. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I do my best treasure hunting at night. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. It's minus 10 degrees. I'm out here, boots on the ground, because I'm afraid I'm going to get my ass in trouble. I don't know why I ever did that. I did some pretty dumb things, but that was probably the dumbest. I got back to the hotel. I couldn't get my feet to unthaw. I mean, they were froze. To make it worse, the air conditioner, I was on the north end of the building. The wind was in the north, and the air conditioner was working instead of the heater. Should have asked for a center room that night. I went to one night I stayed in the Cities of Gold Casino Hotel, and I won $50 playing the Secrets of the Forest game, and I knew I was destined to find something. So I went over to the buffet and I got sick because the crab legs were from last week warmed over. So the next day I was treasure hunting like a sick dog out there trying to find a place to puke. Oh man, I didn't even drink that night. I spent most of my time reading the history of the Tiwa language and learning all these different words in Tiwa, like a Toei. And I actually have the maps in my box. I have all the maps with all the Tiwa names translated into their English language versions of every spot along the Rio Grande from Taos, New Mexico to Santa Fe. I have that in my box. I mean, I have these maps of the Rio Grande with all the different places with their Tiwa names, and I've written beside them their actual English translations. Folks, I spent a lot of time on this. So then Randy goes missing. I knew exactly what the Tiwa names meant, where he was looking, and I'm going, well, I kind of looked in that area myself, honestly. And I'm thinking, this is probably why he was looking there, and speculating about all this. And then after that, Forrest said, well, it's not along the Rio Grande. So he ruled out that search area. But I'd spent a lot of time looking. I made a boots on the ground. I was up at White Rock. I think Randy was trying to get to the area along White Rock underneath the overlook, because there's a famous New Mexican that related to the poem that had a place right there in the White Rock area. And I'm not talking about Buckman either. The Buckman Mesa. I spent a lot of thought on the Buckman Mesa. Honest to God, I put a lot of thought into the Buckman Mesa. Uh, put a lot of thought into that. Well, I mean, I tell you my stories of my treasure hunting, but they don't compare to the experience John Charles Fremont had when he was out there at South Pass and the winter caught him. Now, that boy suffered some cold winter nights. And the Donner Party, I'm not trying to compare my experience at all to the Donner Party. Now, the Donner Party, that was a totally different experience. Are you hungry? Hey, why don't we ask Tim over for dinner? I still don't understand why they didn't eat I guess the oxen and the horses all got covered up by the snow and they couldn't reach them. But I still don't understand why they didn't eat the oxtail and the Horses. Should they have had horses out there at the Donner Party? But then again, nobody wrote uh, Billy Bob loves something Sue on the water tower either. Oh, Newman's got a story up on the Little Powder River. Yeah, I don't know why they put oranges out there. Is there a place in New Mexico that's called like Camel Rock? Is there like a site there near Santa Fe called Camel Rock? Something weird happened when I came back after looking at the Camel Rock one day too on my trip to New Mexico. Well, nothing compares to the night that I spent at the Motel 6 along Cerrillos, where I came out the next morning. My pickup was on blocks and my custom wheels were gone. The next day, Forrest came out with a scrapbook saying that I should try the wheel. You can't make this shit up. Or you can. I'm on natty number 2. I'm on natty number. How do you like my New Mexico Route 66? I tell you what, if you get close to Route 66 in New Mexico, you're getting really close to a person that can tell you all the answers to the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt. Did you really lose your tires in Santa Fe? Well, actually, Nomadic Madman, I lost uh, I lost a tire on my way to Ben last year. So I had a flat tire on my pickup going to Ben, and my tires were probably 16 years old on this pickup. Well, no, they're probably let's see, it's a 20. What was that? That thing was a 2014. They were probably 10 years old, and they had like 30,000 miles on them. I don't drive much, that pickup anyway. And I lost one tire, and I decided to put on a set of 4 because I'd already lost another tire on the same vehicle like a couple months before. And so I just figured the tires had wore out. So I did. I lost 4 tires at the Big O Tires in Cerrillos in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the Big O store. Thank God I put in the portable air compressor. My nephews gave me a DeWalt portable air compressor. Runs off a DeWalt battery, not DeWalt, Milwaukee. Runs off of Milwaukee batteries. It's the best investment you can have in your car. Just make sure you have a charged battery. I mean, it'll pump up a tire pretty fast. And it's not like these cheap slime ones that you have to plug into the cigarette lighter and it'll only air your tire up to 35 pounds. This will air up an 80-pound tire, no problem. So anyway, I had the Milwaukee and I had to stop twice. Uh, well, Jeff stayed in Cerrillos last month. Yeah. It used to be at one time you could get a lot of answers to the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt in Bernalillo, but the the lady that lived in Bernalillo has since moved south of Route 66. I don't know why the lady moved. Maybe she got a divorce. Oh, I've said too much. I'm on my second natty. If you start asking the right questions, you might get some real answers. Uh, okay. Did you really lose your? Yeah, yeah. Okay, I answered that question. I like the hotels out there by the Big O. That's part of on along Cerrillos. That's kind of a newer part of town. It gives you easy access to old Santa Fe Trail and some But there's no gas stations out there. There's really no good gas stations out there. And at night on Cerrillos, if you get further towards the city, the police are always pulling somebody over on Cerrillos. I have no idea what the deal is, but the police are always pulling somebody over on Cerrillos. If you go further downtown, I think on Cerrillos, you get to the place where Forrest Fenn had the showing of the lure at the La Quinta, maybe it was the La Quinta. Was it the La Quinta where they showed the lure? Well, anyway, those hotels right there aren't too bad either, and they're a little less expensive than the ones further out on Cerrillos. I have been live for 60 years. What do you mean? 1 hour? What do you mean 1 hour? I've been live for 60 plus years now. Oh, never mind. YouTube finally added back the time. Yeah, it's kind of like when you play soccer at the end, they add back time. And then it really doesn't favor you that they added back time, because if they hadn't added the time, it'd have been a tie. Nope. I'm on natty number 2. Most of natty number 1, actually, I drank natty number 1 before. And I'm going to really regret this if I get a hangover, because I mean, it might rain tomorrow again, but we do have a lot of wheat left to cut, and I really don't want to be trying to farm hungover at 60. I didn't mind farming and being hungover in my 20s, in my 30s. I mean, it wasn't so bad. It's kind of like, oh, fuck. Gotta go do something tomorrow. But anyway, it's time for another beer. I still got like a third of this one left or more. So, what do you guys think about Forrest Fenn, the Literate Man? Does anybody else have anything to add? Ian, I'm sure you've got some comments here. Um, Turkey was offsides on their final goal against the USA. Well, and they called the USA offsides on that one goal that they scored, and I didn't see the offsides. Okay. There are some things in life I will never understand. One is the solution to the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt, and the second one is, what is offsides in soccer? Honest to God, I cannot figure out what offsides is in soccer. I can't figure offsides in soccer out. I mean, the flag went up. The guy was offsides. Well, I don't even know why there's an offsides rule in soccer. If you want to choose to put 3 people behind the 3 people that are on defense, and those 3 people that are on defense don't want to go back further to guard those people, then that's your fault for not guarding those people. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's a stupid rule. But I don't understand why you have an offsides rule. Why would you have it? Why do you? There would be more goals scored in soccer. Soccer would be a much better and more entertaining sport if you didn't have some arbitrary rule that says that a player of the opposing team that possesses the ball cannot be behind a player of the defending team until the ball gets over there. It's your choice where to deploy in a war, in battle, in combat, in the real world. If somebody decides to hang out behind everybody else and wait for the ball to go score, then they're not playing defense if they lose the ball. So that player becomes irrelevant when it becomes to defense if they give up the possession. And so this is the dumbest rule. You know, you choose in most wars, you choose where you deploy your assets. And if you choose to deploy your asset behind the other players in hopes of lobbing the ball over the guy so that he can score, that should be your choice. If you don't want that guy hanging out behind you, you need to go hang out with that guy further back. I don't see. I don't understand the rule. In no other place in life do you get the opportunity to tell somebody, "Oh, I have to stand in front of you until the ball gets behind you, and then I can go chase after it." That's a There would be so much more. Soccer would be so much more interesting if you could actually deploy your offensive players where you want, when you want. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I can't deploy my offensive player where I want. I run the risk. I run the risk of losing the possession of the ball at any time. Any time. And if I've got one player standing down there by the goal hoping to get the ball kicked to him, he's not going to be playing much defense. He's just going to be standing down there. And so you're going to have more people on the other opposing team and attacking the other goal while the other people hang out at the other end. Soccer would be a much more interesting sport if you could deploy your offensive players where the fuck you want it. Yeah, well, I mean, they said that goal might have actually happened after the buzzer. This is the other thing I don't understand in soccer, and I've watched some women's soccer uh, because the women's soccer is slow enough I can understand it. But anyway, I watched some women's soccer, and it seems to me like when you add this added time is sometimes 6 minutes, and sometimes this added time is 6 minutes plus 2 more minutes, depending upon how the referee feels. Zozo used to play this thing called soccer. I had an aunt that told me one time that soccer would be more popular in the United States than NFL football at some point in time. That she's now 90 years old and she might be getting close to being correct. Because at the time she told me this 40 years ago, soccer was a much more accepted sport in other countries around the world. Of course, she's a language teacher and she taught French and German and Estonian and Russian and however many other languages she knows. And you know, they used to go to Estonia. Her and my uncle used to go to Estonia because her family's from Estonia. They came over, and during that World War II thing, that happened where Hitler did some bad things to people, and her grandfather disappeared one night and they never saw him the next day. Those kinds of things really do happen. Uh, it's not like this made up bullshit that these people from South America. Oh man, we've got all these problems down here. I'm afraid for my life. I need to come to the United States. Have you had a family member killed? No. Were your family threatened by somebody? No. Is it not safe there? No, it's not safe. Yeah, well, anyway, she came over uh, during that period. And it was funny. Well, it's not funny, but she wrote a book about this. She actually has a pretty interesting book. It's called My Journey to America. And uh, anyway, she wrote a book about her coming to America. Her whole family came over, or her brothers and her mother and dad did. But anyway, but they got sponsored by a church group. But when they got here, they ended up landing on a farm in uh, upper mid the upper Atlantic area, and they were basically told to go out and work the fields. By the church group that sponsored them over here. Then after a year or so, they moved to Indianapolis. But anyway, uh, I think that applies to injury time since no timeouts are called. Well, now we have hydration breaks in soccer. I remember when you used to watch a soccer game and you could watch 45 minutes of action with no hydration break. This is the kind of hydration break they need. Yeah, so theoretically, to pay off their debt to the Christian group that sponsored them over here from it, they were in a camp in I'd have to go back and read her book, and I apologize to my aunt for not knowing exactly what country they were in after they left Estonia. But they were in a country for like a year and a half, and then they got passage to the United States. Um, but yeah, theoretically, they had to work off the debt for finally after a year, the family said, "Well, you're in the United States now. We should probably let you do what you want." Uh, Well, in a way, Zozo, it was. In a way, Zozo, it kind of was uh, uh, human trafficking. In a way, um, hydraulic lunches are great, huh? Hydraulic lunches are great. Yeah, could you get me some hydraulic oil with the side of the butter? Yeah, it tastes good. Well, my Martin side of the family came to the United States as an indentured servant. Uh, the story of my Martin side of the family. So over in England, my ancestor, my mom's ancestor, uh, was heir to a castle with a brother, and the brother killed my ancestor's father, and he put the nephew on a ship to the United States, and he landed in Orange, Tennessee, around Sharps Chapel area, and he became a 14-year-old servant to the Gibbs family. Uh, he later married one of the Gibbs daughters. I swear to God, this should make a movie. Come to the Americas as a 14-year-old, falls in love with the daughter of the people you're working for. And right down the road is Caswell Conrad Sharp's whole entire family, which might include Joseph Henry Sharp's grandfather. And one of those kids decides to marry uh, uh, the Martin's son, William Farrell Martin. Uh, yeah, I should. Yeah, well, I'd have to look up the family tree. Come on. Bill Gorman can help me with my family tree. Uh, I might need a dresser or two, or a bullet, or a cowboy car or something. I have this history here somewhere. It's not far away. Hold on a second. Maybe I can get this for you. All right. Where is this at? Well, it looks something. All right. So that looks something like this. So there's Caswell Conrad Sharp married Sally Gibbs. And Henry Sharp, there's Henry Sharp, married Mary Black, okay? And then over here we have Selena Dooley. And there's Jesse Martin, who married Phoebe Gibbs. And Jesse Martin is the man that was, Jesse Martin was the guy that was put on a boat. And he married Phoebe. And as you can see over here, there's the Sharps and the Gibbs married together. All right. So Caswell Conrad Sharp married Sally Gibbs. And then Henry Sharp married Margaret Black. And then, anyway, William Sharp became part of the Boston Tea Party. Okay, whatever. I told you I had that somewhere. I'm getting, I'm getting pretty loose with, I'm getting pretty loose with my information tonight. I'm getting pretty loose with my information. I still haven't figured out how to fill out this form. If I ever figure out how to fill out this form, I might be able to get the location of my dad's military service. If I ever figure out how to fill out that form correctly. They wanted a certificate of death, so I sent them that. But then they needed some more information, and I don't know, COVID got in the way or something. So I still haven't found my dad's military records. I was going to send this to Forrest Fenn one night. I used to order these postcards. Can anybody tell me what that building is? Yeah, Zozo, I think Bill Gorman and I might have, my ancestors and Bill Gorman might have fought together in the Civil War or shot at each other. Does anybody know where that building is? Zozo says it's the Roundhouse. Zozo is actually correct. That is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was going to send that to Forrest, but I used to order these historic postcards, and I'd go to random places, and I'd send them to him. Here's what that old school building in Gypsum looked like at one time. It was pretty handsome, but all of the flat part of that building's gone now, and I've since sold the other part of it. Well, anyway, that's what that old school building in Gypsum used to look. I used to order these old. I like historic postcards. I used to order them, and then I'd send them. I'd send them to Forrest. Yeah, yeah. I used to own that whole entire school building. I tore down this entire section because there was no roof on it. I tore down that entire section, and so what's left is the original 1920 building. But I sold that to a guy uh, by the name of Lundar. I'm not sure what that guy's doing with the building. No, I sold it to a guy that's working on fixing it up. I couldn't pour any more money into it. It was a money pit. I only lost $10,000 on that. So who knows? I lost more money on the Force Fed treasure hunt. Jeff thinks it's Lambeau Field. No, but I used to the Capitol building. Trusted Living thinks it's the Acropolis Steakhouse. No, it's the Santa Fe Steakhouse. It's the Roundhouse in Santa Fe. But yeah, I used to buy these historic postcards and send them to Forrest. I might have sent him a jackalope. I think the last card I sent to Forrest Fenn, I bought a couple of them so I could send him another one. Let me see if I have it. I might have one more. Getting pretty loose with my information. I was going to send him this one. I was going to send him that one. Where's the one? I used to use stamps. I used to send him Andrew Wyeth stamps. I used to send him Andrew Wyeth stamps. If I was still this now, I'd send him Bison stamps. Ah. I feel like Mr. Miyagi right now. Oh, I gotta find it. I gotta find it. I'm sure I got one more left. Oh, I'm gonna be sad if I can't find it. Does anybody get the Cal Farley cards from the Boys Ranch? They always send me cards. The Boys Ranch. I don't know why. I was gonna send him this one for Dizzy Dean. I was gonna send him a happy birthday card for Dizzy Dean. Where's it at? Where's it at? Come on, you gotta find it. Maybe I don't have it. Maybe I don't have any more. I might have thrown them all out. Oh, let's see if I can find it. Oh, it's like a drunk person looking for something. This is almost as exciting as Ian trying to figure out if he had his audio on. That was pretty rude, guys. We probably should have teased old Ian like that. I've been starting to keep all the little messages my mom writes to me. I don't know. I used to not keep them, but now that I've gotten older, I've been keeping all the messages my mom sends, and like my birthday cards. I don't think I have one. I don't think I have one. Darn it. Oh man. This is no fun. I'm starting to get a headache already. I haven't even finished my beer. Oh man. Well, I guess I don't have one. I don't have one. Well, I thought I bought multiple copies of that card, but I guess I didn't. Well, I guess I don't have it. Sorry. I saw this one though. Maybe I sent that card. Maybe the last one I had, I sent to Shiloh for Christmas. I might have sent the last one I had to Shiloh for Christmas last year. Well, anyway, what else do we have? The Ghost Dancer. Good to see you. Well as can be. Okay. Head down and shoulder to the wheel. Knee to the wheel is much better. Yeah, Trusted Living's telling us where Ben is going to hide the impossible poem solution to the chest at Ben Buree. It's going to be behind the outhouse. I never understood why they called an outdoor bathroom an outhouse. Oh, I guess I just answered my question right there. Man, in the Unforgiven movie, it sucked to be in the outhouse. I shot the hell out of that guy. It's a hell of a thing, killing a man. You take everything he's going to be. No, you take everything he is, and everything he's ever going to be. Yeah, there's some good lines in the movie Unforgiven. Well, that's about all I got for the literary man. Forrest Fenn, you are a literate man. Here's to the thrill of the chase. Here's to all the books that Forrest Fenn wrote. Here's to all the correspondence he gave to each and every one of us. Here's to that record that he created of his existence on this planet uh, in the form of his memoir, his accounts of Sharp, his accounts of Sloan, and all those other people that were involved in his earthly existence. What greater tribute can there be to somebody than to have a book written about, or a story published about, or something written about someone? So did I read you my article about being an old farmer? I probably read that one, didn't I? Yeah. Are there any nominations? Any further business tonight, or shall we call it a beer? Well, probably won't be back till we get the wheat harvested. Might be a couple weeks, might be a day or two, uh, might be a month. I don't know, but could be a while. But remember, you can always read if you miss me. If you feel like you're not getting everything, you can always read The Thrill of the Chase. You can always read excerpts out of The Thrill of the Chase and feel like you're still a part of the David Paisano show. Zozo says, "What? What are we nominating people? What are we nominating people for? We're nominating people for prizes that don't exist, for awards that never come. We're nominating people for fun enhancers. Oh, I didn't even ask if fun enhancers had happened yet. Here's to the thrill of the chase and the sequel, recovering the chase. Yeah, sometimes when the cover comes off, you have to recover it. Yeah, the covers. It's like the scene. That's Here's an embarrassing story that I'll tell right now. So, my brother and I were kind of poor. My parents didn't really have a lot of money. We didn't grow up in a house of privilege. And when our baseballs started to tatter, in other words, the seams of the baseball would start to come loose and the cover would start to come off, I would go get a needle and thread and some dental floss and sew the covers back onto our baseballs so that we would have balls that we could hit and play in the yard. And usually we had a little backstop, and one of us would pitch and the other one would hit. And with one ball, that becomes kind of a task. And so we had like 3 or 4 or 5 balls. And when the covers would come off, we would I would sew them back on with dental floss. That's a true story from the archives of my life as a child, growing up on a farm with no money and no prospects. Zozo has embarrassing stories, but will not share. Well, I'm not sure that's a terribly embarrassing story. It's a story of poverty. It's a story of creativity. It's a story of making do with what you had. But when you would hit that baseball that had the cover resewn on with a uh, dental floss and a needle, felt like Babe Ruth when we hit the shed and put a dent in it. So one of the sheds was, if you could picture, out in right field, like Boston. And if you were right-handed and you pulled the ball, you might put a dent in the shed. Now, right field was wide open. It was an open field, and there was a steel bin out there. And if you could hit the ball to right field and get it to the bin, my brother and I called that a home run. And in between the bin and the blue shed was kind of the white shed, which was rarely ever hit. But if you got the ball to roll to the white shed, it was considered a home run. Well, we always had this issue of the blue building, and if it hit the blue building, what was it called? An out. And I was the right-handed batter. My brother was left-handed, so my brother always hit the ball out towards the bin and got lots of home runs, and I always kind of hit the ball towards the blue shed. And so the argument always was if those were outs or if those were hits. And anyway, the story of our backyard baseball games are in our minds legendary between my brother and I. As I was Sid Fitch on days, throwing both right and left-handed, and my brother was Hank Aaron. No, no, we generally played as George Brett. Um, uh, that was our go-to, George Brett. We would don our powder blue, though we would have gotten by going to that one game every year. That our one vacation every year, or several years, was one ball game in Kansas City, which was, I don't know, 4 hours away. And one year we went to the Truman Library in addition to the ball game. I guess that was our literary or educational part of our summer adventures. Yes, we did not have long, arduous drives to Yellowstone, where we passed many places from Temple, Texas to that national park. We did not have a fancy travel trailer. We had the 1973 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, which sadly one winter had the freeze plugs come out of it. And what would have normally been a 4 hour drive home from the Kansas City Royals baseball game, the Truman Library, became an arduous 16-hour journey, filling a car up with water as it digested the engine along the way, with stops in Lawrence and Topeka and Manhattan and Fort Riley and Abilene, Solomon, all to fill up that water tank. And the need to get home because my dad's insulin, which was stored in the Coleman 1 gallon water container, was in jeopardy of going bad because he was an insulin dependent diabetic. Yes, these are the tales of being on the road from my childhood. Anyway, yeah, we were the Pine Tar brothers. We couldn't afford pine tar. We had to just slather on a little bit of dirt. I was affectionately on the team called the High Water Hitters, and my brother was on the team called the Flood Mud Kids, as we played for the local Gypsum Valley Recreational League. String with a rubbery coating. Zozo grew up poor, David. For Christmas, I usually got a couple pair of socks, a new pair of underwear, pants, and a shirt. If I was lucky, a toy. Yeah, that was it for us. I remember when I was in junior high and I begged my parents for an Ocean Pacific hoodie, and that was my one extravagance for the year. I mean, honestly, it was my one extravagance for the year. Of course, I chose the ugly, uh, non-masculine color, and I never wore it to school, but it was important to have because everybody else had the Ocean Pacific uh, stuff. It wasn't so much that we were poor; it's that we were farmers. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and back in the time of the 1960s and early 70s, and it was still acceptable for a man to bring home the bacon. And he worked at the John Deere dealership in the parts department, And he made a living wage to raise a family, but uh, my parents had bought this farm, and they were paying it off, and so they had to make mortgage payments on 160 acres and a house and an outbuilding, and of course there was the farm machinery to run the farm, and that kind of thing. And the 1970s were not really terribly great for the farm economy, and in fact, a lot of the farmers lost their farms in the 1980s. And if it was not for the fact that my dad had a job in town and a steady income, I'm sure we would not have made it on just a farm income. And but the thing about it is, I never thought we were poor. When I was growing up, I never thought we were poor. When I was honestly 8 years old, didn't think I was poor. I was 10 years old, didn't think I was poor. When I was in junior high, didn't think we were poor. High school, never thought we were poor. Um, and I was fortunate enough to go to college, and uh, but thinking back on it, we were poor. You know, I remember the day that our cousins gave my mom and dad a set of basketball shoes so that we could go play on the basketball team. Hand me down, hand me down basketball shoes. Two sizes too large, by the way. Was probably the day I realized that we didn't have a lot of money. The Newman drove a '77 Olds Cutlass Supreme for a while. Had the 1976 model. It was blue. It was a four-door. It had a 350 engine and a four-barrel carburetor on it. And the summer before, the 1976 four-door Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme was the driver's education car. And somehow my father thought it would be smart to go to the dealership and purchase the driver's education car from the summer before to be my brother and I's transportation to high school. Can you beat that? Meanwhile, my neighbor, when that little girlie turned 16, her daddy bought her a brand new Ford Mustang convertible. And we had this community ride sharing agreement for all the practices that occurred before the bus, because we rode the bus. Even though there was a car, we rode the bus unless we had an activity where the activity bus was coming home at like 9 o'clock. And then we got to drive the car because my dad and mom didn't want to come pick us up at school, which was 12 miles away at 10 o'clock at night when we could drive the car home. And none of this is bad. I have no I have no bad feelings to my parents for any of the car or any of the stuff, because to me it was a car. It was transportation to school. Riding the bus was riding the bus. You know, I didn't, when I was that age, I didn't question my parents' decisions. And I think we'd be better served if we had kids these days that didn't question their parents' decisions. We just did as they asked. But if I wanted some money to go out to town on a Friday night to Godfather's Pizza and the arcade, my dad would give me $10 on Friday night, and he'd say, "Do you need any more money, or is $10 good enough to go to the arcade and Godfather's Pizza?" And I'd gladly say, "Yes, it was." You know, I was happy that he was willing to give me enough money to go out on a Friday night and have a good time. Didn't matter. I was driving the 1976 Oldsmobile 4-door Cutlass Supreme. Yet here I sit as a unmarried 60-year-old man who, if he would have had a nicer car, might have been divorced 4 times and had 6 kids. Oh man. Anyway, but can you imagine going to school the next? Can you imagine driving the ed car to school? Like the summer before, like 25 people drove that car, learning how to drive, and you show up the first day of activities, driving the I'll never forget the day that the little sweetheart that got the brand new 1981 Ford Mustang convertible, white, red interior. I'll never forget the day that it was her turn to drive the group to school. There was like 4 of us, and she drove us over to school. And I went to football practice. She went to volleyball practice. I think Duff and Kevin were on the football team. And when it came time to go back home, she left me. Duff and Kevin got in the car with her, and she forgot that she was supposed to bring me back home. Oh, oh. I was the fat kid in high school, by the way. So anyway, okay. So I've been sharing more of my life with you than I probably should, but anyway, I grew up at 18 miles out. Never felt poor. Uh, I had an '83. Was that a Mustang or a Cutlass Supreme? Uh, I feel yeah. Both of my parents were on welfare for a few years. I joined the band at 14. Yeah, Zozo. Kudos to you for finding your way. Your first car accident was in '79. Man, the Cutlasses were popular back then. Trusted quit school at 15 and went to work full time. I wanted to eat better and more often, have clothes and fun, and find things at the metal detector. Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, we all found our way. We all found our way, and no matter where we started, we all ended up here. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, but I mean, the shared experience of the human existence, I think, is something that's immutable. I think it's something that everyone appreciates, and you know, you can go back to the debate of circumstance. It's the old nature versus nurture. Were you born into your circumstances or do you make them? And certainly, people that are born into certain situations have a different set of choices to choose from than people that aren't. But so many people that are high achievers are not born into high achiever status. And I think it's that desire, I think it's that humbleness that you get from not having that makes you a better leader, makes you a better person, and makes you a better appreciator of what you can achieve and do. Oh my God, Ghost Dancer had the Cutlass that originally came with the diesel engine. I remember those. I remember those. The Gutlasses. We used to call the diesel the Gutless because yeah, it had a diesel engine in it, but it was a gutless little turd of an engine. Uh, in 1973, General Motors went on strike, and every car that came out of the factory had a problem. It's like, well, we're coming into work today, but we're going to throw some rocks in the frame rail before we weld it up, and it's going to have a perpetual rattle to it. We might put the glow plugs in the engine today on the assembly line, but we're not going to quite hammer them in all the way. Uh, I guess they wouldn't be glow plugs; they'd be freeze plugs. But anyway, uh, well, anyway, we've got some great life experience here. Oh, I think I think the greatest feeling in life is to be content. And Forrest, towards the end of the chase, harped on the idea of contentment. And I don't know how we all reach our own contentment. Um, there was a country western song that goes something like, it's not having what you want, but wanting what you have. And, really, there's a lot to that lyric, for happiness. Oh, the QMP 666 has a rainy day. Well, that reminds me of the what this something bridge song. Sunny day. Does something like that. I don't know. Take it down a cobblestone. I'm feeling groovy. That's like the 17th Street Bridge song or 27th Street. I don't know. Can't even remember who sings that song. Contentment is key. Cat in the Hat. Trust the Living says creating enough of a perpetual income stream to live on is where it's at. Well, that is true. I mean, generational wealth is, I think, the aspirational goal. Uh, having income stream that you can live off of, and it might not be a lot of money, but it's the money you need to make you happy. I think that Trust the Living's kind of got that figured out. HZ Holden Ute .308 Slippery as. Yeah, it's a struggle, I based upon the people I know. There are people that have had a much greater challenge in their family life and their multiple children in the home struggle than I did. It was just me and my brother, my mom and dad, the four of us. Uh, on my dad's single income, a little bit of farm income, paying the mortgage on the house and the farm. And, you know, uh, I'm sure we were not as bad off as some other people, but we didn't have extravagances. Uh, no name brand T-shirts, no name brand shoes, no nothing beyond shelter and clothing. Lots of baloney. Uh, one night a month, maybe we'd go out as a family for chicken fried steak or chicken or maybe the sirloin stockade. Uh, but back then, with steak was not that. A steak is an entree at the sirloin stockade was not that much more expensive than having chicken at Betty's Fried Chicken. So it's the protein differences in price were not as great as they are today. But anyway, it was maybe Sambo's. Uh, you know, I've been trained for 16 years. Trusted, it's Easter said. Then it's easier said than done. Well, yeah, Zozo's making the point. The parental and sibling love of the family, trumps all the financial aspects of what you have there. It's important to live in a family of, uh, you know, yeah, I'm to the point where I'm going to try to retire when I'm 62, have the farm be, kind of transition to my nephews. And my Social Security is not going to be great. It's not going to be the biggest amount of money in the world, but I don't. The house, my grandparents built this house. This house has probably been paid for since the 1950s, 40s, 30s. God knows. My grandparents probably almost lost this house in the 30s and the property, because I've seen some mortgage documents back in the 30s and 40s where my grandparents took out a mortgage against this property. And so they, possibly could have lost it. I remember when my grandmother was making booties. She was a very talented needlework person. She made lots of blankets and uh, booties and stuff like that. And she used to sell her goods at the local sundry store. My grandpa obviously planted the crops, harvested the corn, sold it, that kind of thing. They only had one vehicle. They had a 1949 Diamond T pickup that they drove. Uh, that was featured in my parents' wedding because that's what they drove. But they also used that pickup to haul the grain to the elevator from the farm. And I for the life of me cannot figure out how my grandparents ever made it. I think the way they made it is the 1950s. The Corps of Engineers and the state of Kansas and the Eisenhower administration decided to stop the flooding in Kansas City. And the way to stop the flooding in Kansas City was to dam up all the rivers that ended up in Kansas City. Smoky Hill River, Big Blue, okay, Kansas River. Uh, they all converge, end up in Kansas City. So they put in the levee system within the United States, within Kansas. So they put in Belford, Wilson, Canopolis. All these lakes got put in Kansas, Corps Engineer Project. And part of that was to relocate the Smoky Hill River channel. And the only reason I think my grandparents were able to keep this property is the government forced them to sell a part of it to the government to put in a big old fucking levee. And so they got this money from the levee, condemnation proceedings, and that money allowed them to pay off the note. And so they basically didn't have any debt on the property going into like the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And the 80s were really bad on farm income. And so that's how I think they were able to keep the property. But anyway, uh, 35 years to get a guaranteed pension. Yeah, I'm not looking for any pension. By the time I became working age, most of the companies had decided to do away with pensions, and they made all of their retirement savings in the form of cash value, and you had to manage your own retirement savings plan. There are a few places in the government where you can still get a pension. There's a few co-ops offering pensions as part of their retirement plan, but in the corporate world, by and large, pensions are gone. There's no pensions. The AT&T, I mean, I am not in the AT&T pension fund, but the AT&T pension fund is well funded, by the way. But I'm not a part of it because they went to cash value for me and everybody else. And so we can't get we can't get to the AT&T pension fund because we were converted to a cash value and we have individual retirement savings accounts, as do most other corporations these days. Uh, you can obviously save in an IRA or a Roth IRA yourself. You can also save in a number of different ways, but most people can't afford to save. Yep, I took my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. So, I mean, for anybody that was able to still participate in the pension plan, congratulations. My dad worked for John Deere, and my mom's still a beneficiary on his retirement. So she gets a pension, my dad's pension, if you will. But it's not that much. And, Social Security. Oh, Trust is getting his retirement from the Bricklayers and Allied Craftsmen Union. Well, that's true. I guess I kind of did gloss over the unions out there. Uh, and if you are a member of a particular trade union, there are still some pensions out there for law enforcement, firefighters, and trade, which do still encompass some pension funds. But by and large, if you work for a corporate entity, a corporation, they did away with pensions a long time ago. Okay, I babbled on. I babble on. I appreciate everybody that joined in tonight. Purpose of this show is to uh, stay relevant in the Forrest Fenn community. Ha ha ha. No, the purpose of the show is to celebrate Forrest Fenn as a literate man. Uh, I was kind of hard on him the last time I was on. Didn't want to leave the lasting impression that, I thought that all he was a pot hunter. Because the guy was really, truly multifaceted individual. And, it's exploring all the facets of a person that maybe perhaps helps you understand who they are, who they were. Uh, and so I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Thanks again for joining in. Uh, Participation of everybody is great. Uh, Zozo, Ghost Dancer, Trusted, uh, Jeff, everybody else that stopped by. Uh, Fantastic. I know I'm leaving some people out. QMB, uh, but enjoyed the company of everybody that comes in, and uh, hope you have a good night. And hopefully, at the front of the show, for those people that aren't familiar with Forrest Fenn, maybe they can learn a little thing or two about his literary interests and uh, what was contributed in that area. From Cornfield County, Kansas, salute.